Hi everyone. This video is essentially me reading a recording of a dedication that I wrote to Nex Benedict, who was killed on February 8th as a result of injuries that they sustained during a hate attack at their high school in Owasso, Oklahoma, the day before. All this video is me reading that aloud, so I'm going to do that now. Remember the Fallen, an ode to Nex Benedict. This 9-page piece is dedicated to the memory of Nex Benedict, a 16-year-old non-binary student who was killed in the girls' bathroom of Owasso, Oklahoma on February 7th, 2024. I say killed because the actions taken there led swiftly to their murder. They died of their injuries a day later, delaying their actual death to February 8th, one that the local community has tried to sweep under the rug. I will do no such thing. Nex was the victim of a modern-day witch hunt, one led by the usual suspects enabled and defended by moderate politics. I didn't feel initially as though I had the mental strength to address what was obviously a murder at Owasso High School, goaded by those in power to encourage puritanical youngsters to do their dirty work. But here we are. The status quo is that of a Christian ethno-state, a white supremacist settler colony dressed up in Christian dogma and American liberalism in a neoliberal market, demanding its defenders carry out attacks to keep things in line. Fear rules the in-group to attack a given out-group as demanded by the establishment, i.e. us versus them, the creation of a monstrous enemy. In turn, settler colonialism demands a war of extermination through a heteronormative scheme delivered through the regressive language of a village scapegoat sacrificed for the greater good. It's a blame game, and not one that stays put. The increasing boldness of open hate crimes and their lack of punishment owes itself to one of capitalism's central tenets, infinite growth. Both through frontier genocide and military urbanism, the continuation of said crimes relies on constant, widespread dehumanization, i.e. of those the state would persecute and destroy for profit. There must always be a monster to marginalize, punish, and annihilate. Equally so, there must be someone just as monstrous to carry these executions out, a jailer, but also a judge, jury, and executioner dressed up as a protector. Sadly, such persons are often not those who know better. As Nex's untimely death proves, state killers are often those most susceptible to fear and dogma handed down from on high by canonical patriarchs and their subordinates, children. Nex was murdered by other teenagers taught to fear what is different from the norm, abjecting a 16-year-old peer into a state of exception where death is expected. In short, Nex fit the bill because they weren't cishet, thus meant to be destroyed by those who were. The crime and its execution are embodied, then, by a moral code that can be seen, i.e. similar to male/female or black/white, but in this case, correct/incorrect, insofar as cishet is correct and anything else is not. Despite the American tendency to debate Nazis and white moderates, there isn't anything to debate here. Simply the actions taken against Nex by their peers, the student body and school at large, were entirely wrong. Nex was failed by their community, but also lynched by them, made into an involuntary sacrifice despite following the rules. Segregation is no defense, and Nex went to the correct bathroom, only to be killed anyways by those the rule was supposed to protect, teenage girls. In truth, the rules are coding behaviors that condition cishet people and token agents to attack incorrect persons. The three attackers used the rule to isolate Nex, then entered the bathroom in bad faith to execute them, the rule and the person. In turn, the state's ipso facto sanctioning of selective punishment has been demonstrated by their shielding of Nex's hangmen, or rather in this case, hangwomen. What followed has often been described as a fight, as though Nex had some say in what happened, or that the engagement was somehow fair. That's not how reactive violence works, and there's certainly nothing fair about 3 against 1. Instead, the target of genocide is isolated and kettled, then brutally punished with extreme prejudice and total impunity by the in-group playing Darvo. Deny, attacker, reverse victim, offender, i.e., while acting as instruments of bigoted revenge, blaming Nex instead of capitalism for the so-called hard times the system yields by design. In turn, said in-group enjoys the privilege of security inside the shelter as a fortress to defend from perceived outsiders, i.e. they're the victim protecting themselves from someone dangerous attacking them, what's known in military parlance as a false flag operation. Fortress mentality isn't just a byproduct, but an essential fixture of settler colonialism. Its fear of the outside, the dark, the unknown, leads to a foreign plot from within that must be exercised through the destruction of an assigned victim that is met in bad faith by those playing the victim. In truth, state defenders are actually the murderers in disguise, imprisoned by the state. It's prison gang behavior. Except the truth is more complicated. Nex's killers were not men trapped within established prisons made to punish criminals after the fact, but teenage girls punished a priori, living in a prison by another name, home. It constitutes a structure that jails everyone, but teaches one side that they are not in a jail at all, provided they do their part, a euphemism for neglect, ignorance, and disdain, but also murder. As such, those who rationalize and embrace the brutal nature of the state's Faustian bargain tokenize to uphold it, killing perceived vermin so they themselves are not chattelized, thus killed. As such, those who rationalize and embrace the brutal nature of the state's Faustian bargain tokenize to uphold it, killing perceived vermin so they themselves are not chattelized, then killed. To maintain elite hegemony in the domestic level, American dogma pits its occupants against each other by having them assign these roles to themselves. This has been the case since America's inception. The country was once more openly described as a colony, a fact that remains constant after its so-called liberation. As Howard Zinn rightly expressed in A People's History of the United States, a select group during the War of Independence was purchased by pitting said group, white men, against black slaves and indigenous peoples. Said group were openly slaves themselves, indentured servants, and from that point on became slaves in secret, slaves to the myth of them being middle class, thus free and righteous. The reality is these groups militarize inside America as a police state on home soil, one equally bloodthirsty towards those inside the state of exception, at home as abroad. And yet the imperial boomerang does not stay put, reliably sending imperialism back home to empire. As the chickens come home to roost, part of the ignominious perfidy is the re-enslavement of those once liberated to do the state's dirty work again. Witch hunts aren't carried out by cruel men alone, but scared little girls who become bigots of many kinds, doing what they're told in service to capital, the man, the elite, TERFs. Feminism is historically rooted in genocide, its various waves having been increasingly bigoted. The further back you go, racism in the first, transphobia in the second, fascism, thus settler colonialism, with more steps. Intersectional solidarity demands the equality of convenience be put aside for the equality of all, challenging older forms of selective activism that haven't gone anywhere. TERFs, whether people like it or not, are still feminists, and queer-coded ones at that. The dumb vigilantism of the Awaso trio extends to those who should know better, but choose to colonize themselves anyways. Capitalism sexualizes everything dimorphically to serve a heteronormative settler colonial binary's profit motive. Per Cartesian dualism, said motive thrives on division, creating monsters inside the home that activate and lynch themselves to uphold the imperium. It's less an enemy at the gates and more an enemy possibly inside. So, just as the fortress stands in defiance of perceived invasion, and likewise must be manned from all angles lest its bastions fall from within, so commence the witch hunts, smoking out Trojans. Except accuracy isn't the point, the maintaining of power and control's illusion is, and through constant looming threats of lethal force that flower invariably into murder. Though not all-powerful, the state will try to monopolize violence, terror, and monsters to serve profit, i.e. through a lie of sovereignty that is haunted by the victims of its own abjection, the ghost of the counterfeit. Next, then, was a monster in the eyes of those who became monstrous in ways the state wanted. This kind of moral panic/persecution mania is useful, keeping the bourgeoisie in charge, and those around them obedient, faithful, and scared, thus violent. The girls who killed Nex were policing the school's territory for its owners, and the owners of those owners. In other words, marginalized infighting, divide and conquer, triangulates against those who are different, all done to prove oneself as worthy against the ultimate foe for the ultimate good. If one isn't a good little girl, one is a bad girl, a demon, a whore, and must be punished. So the killers took matters into their own hands, prosecuting a civil war to stall their own torture for as long as possible, i.e. clemency being a temporary reprieve granted wordlessly by throwing someone else recognized of their kind under the bus. Capital punishment for appearing to have disobeyed state tenets for being incorrect. The degree for which open violence is called for changes, but the results of spoken or unspoken examples calling for vigilante/official violence do not. People like Nex are regular casualties of fascism victimizing its own executioners to a lesser degree. This is how stochastic terrorism works. It targets children, turning them into cops and victims, deputized from a young age to seek out evil and brutalize it stupidly. Indeed, no one is more stupid or scared than a stochastic terrorist, e.g. Chaya Raichik, following her interview with Tila Lorenz. All of these uphold the status quo, defending capital at the cost of everything save the elite's well-being. Nex was killed to serve the elite. The girls killed them to serve the elite. Raichik defended it, badly, to serve the elite. The teachers, principal, and superintendent let it happen to serve the elite, on and on, up and up, all around. The tragic legacy of this stupid, violent affair is how preventable and unnecessary Nex' death was. Not only are they, an innocent enby, dead, other killers were taught since birth to see Nex as A, zombie, or B, a zombie or demon who must die, and B, someone whose execution would be rewarded with protection by the state and its more established and non-bloodied proponents, which will sacrifice the girls if needed in order to save face. In turn, the girls' own legacy adopts the self-defeating nature of secular colonialism, that they, as girls, become the very thing they were taught to fear, a killer in the bathroom. They're the danger, the one who knocks. Worse, their fulfillment of revenge against a perceived backstabber becomes expected of them, i.e. to backstab others time and time again, not out of genuine self-defense, but to lie about being under attack while living in a constant state of fear, of fight or flight that leads them to kill without question. They become weak, treacherous, and duplicitous, claiming victimhood while in the same breath beating a 16-year-old enby to death in the bathroom. Whether indoors or not, a lynching is still a lynching, and ultimately a false, cowardly act. There's nothing moral about what they did. All the more tragic given those with the power to end the violence continue to do nothing. There is a reason for this, and a cold, cruel, and calculating one. They want Nex's premature demise to signal a series of deaths that expand outward, i.e. to regress towards medieval positions of power that, while they frankly haven't gone anywhere, are maintained through fear and dogma as capitalism decays by design, thus leading to fascism. Make no mistake, America has always been an empire. That empire is in decline, its fascist elements coming out of hiding to do said empire's work for it. Nex's murder should demonstrate that. Their death and its downplaying is not the actions of the moral or the just, but a cabal of fascist hangmen having children do their dirty work for them. It's the stuff of the Salem witch trials, the Crusades, the work of empire brought home to roost seemingly from another age, evoked in this one. And yet, just as with Palestine's own faraway purge, this isn't another age. It's the here and now, and the return of the barbaric past shows that nothing is functionally changed. Until February 8th, Nex was alive, but living in terror. After February 8th, they were dead, killed by their fellow students who should be protecting them, but choose not to. The students failed them. The parents failed them. The system failed them, except the horror of the latter comes by design. To have people destroy the marginalized for profit, it isn't a failure of capitalism at all then, but a success meant to enrich the smallest number of people possible to the detriment of all others. I will not stand idly by and let this child become a victim of circumstance. Nex deserves justice, just as the indigenous peoples of the Americas deserve justice. The victims of American imperialism in Asia and the global South deserve justice, and those of the transatlantic slave trade ferried along the Middle Passage deserve justice, and so on. The dead then and now deserve justice, and the undead sentenced to die but not yet dead deserve justice. The state assigns undeath as a giving and receiving of police violence delivered in paramilitary forms, but also stochastic, random ones. Things start small in the beginning and wait to explode. A dog whistle to summon up the hounds, who have been preparing their whole lives to rip state workers apart from the outer margins inwards. They eagerly sharpen their knives, drooling for the apocalypse and its zombies to emerge, so they may wet them with fresh blood. In doing so, state enforcers, including little girls, become the vampiric fangs of the bloodthirsty elite. They gather blood for others to drink and subsist on the curdled dregs. GNC people have always been alienized and made into deathly fetishes within the state apparatus. Nex is far from the first, but they do constitute a signal for those watching to act in one of two ways during genocide: to kill more of us when dog whistled, or to stand by our side, thus against the elite and their attack dogs enacting genocide from moment to living moment. Nex was human, as are we, and capitalism has no use for people who see each other as human. It wants us dehumanizing ourselves so capital can function as normal, moving money through nature at the cost of human life. Capitalism needs us to die, so we need to remember and honor Nex's humanity. We must if some of us are to survive and develop a better world, one that capitalism forbids us from imagining through capitalist realism. The cancelled future, the one where vigilante violence against mutants is expected and performed as a means of escapist fun. We need to stand together against the ultimate foe, the state and its enforcers, but also their harmful illusions. If not, all of us will die, or be forced into the closet, which is no different. Just so white, powerful men like Joe Biden, Donald Trump, and Elon Musk and their tokenized subordinates can profit off our misery, then forget about it when their memory fails them. Fuck them. And the ghost of Rome they retreat into, that needs to be burned, subverted into something safer for all peoples. This piece is dedicated to Nex Benedict, a 16-year-old enby person who was murdered by 3 of their peers, and whose murder was covered up by those who should protect them from harm. Everyone, see you, Nex. And I'm sorry this happened to you. I, for one, will not be quiet. I, as a trans woman, will stand with you in the face of tyranny. Go with Satan, little one. The place they go towards is a place even less imaginable to most of us than the city of happiness. I cannot describe it at all. It is possible that it does not exist, but they seem to know where they are going, the ones who walk away from Omelis.